Thank you, Judge, for that warm introduction, and thank you, fellow patriots, for coming out tonight. You know, some heard about this rally and wondered why we're making such a big deal about religious freedom. Well, I happen to think religious freedom is a big deal. What about you? On the other hand, there are those, particularly the media here today, who sincerely want to know what our message is. So let me explain why we are here. We stand here today as Americans, alarmed at the increased secularism of our society and the steady erosion of our first, most cherished freedom. We want to show the community and the nation that we will stand up for religious freedom in America. Regardless of political party or persuasion, we will defend this basic human right of ours, and we will demand that our First Amendment rights be honored. That is why we are here today. Earlier this week, Catholic Archbishop William Lori of Baltimore noted that for some time now, both life and liberty have been under assault by an overarching, godless secularism, replete with power and money, but sadly lacking in wisdom. A secularism that relentlessly seeks to marginalize the place of faith in our society. And he's right. For decades, we have witnessed our nation grow less tolerant of its religious character and tradition, and more bold in its attempts to silence religious people and erase our religious heritage. All too often, religious people and patriots alike have been too scared or unprepared to fight back, or perhaps they've been guilty of wishful thinking, saying to themselves, "Never in America." But that's beginning to change. It may not be politically correct to say this, but our nation was a nation built on Judeo-Christian values and ideas. That is a historical fact. I don't think, however, that most Americans today either know that fact or desire it as the vision for the future of America. Secularism is on the rise, and this has significant implications for the future of the family, the unborn, the church, the economy, and individual and religious freedom. Maybe you heard of the recent Pew survey of 11 days ago. It shows that 1 out of every 5 Americans now identifies as religiously unaffiliated. That's up 5% from 5 years ago, 10% from 2 decades ago. The number among those 30 and younger, my peer group, is an alarming 32%. Why is this statistic so alarming? It's alarming because secularism strikes at the very foundation of our nation's character and jeopardizes its ability to remain free and strong for future generations. Is that what you want for America? Neither do I. Our nation's founders presupposed that certain rights are endowed to us by our Creator, and that no state has the legitimate authority or power to undermine those rights. So they gave us a Constitution and a Bill of Rights to enshrine them. The first freedom in the Bill of Rights is the right to freely exercise our religion. This freedom is the first, most fundamental of human goods and rights. And it was never meant to be limited to the 4 walls of one's place of worship. Archbishop Lori wisely noted that in rejecting the wisdom of religious faith, in trying to contain and diminish it, secularism devalues human life. And when human life is no longer perceived as in the image of God, then sooner or later, life and liberty becomes dispensable. The tragedy of abortion, for example, legalized by the Supreme Court decision of Roe v. Wade, has claimed the lives of over 50 million unborn children over the last 40 years. And it has left their moms, our aunts, mothers, daughters, sisters, and grandmothers with an irreparable loss and to be silent victims of post-abortive stress. We also see the secularist assault on human life threatening the terminally ill and the frail elderly by the promotion of laws to legalize assisted suicide. But there are two new fronts on human life that have opened up in the last few years, and I want to direct your attention to those two fronts right now. The first new front was mentioned earlier by the judge. It's a mandate issued in January by this administration, by its Health and Human Services Department. It requires every insurance plan in America, no exception, to cover certain preventative services for women with no copay. We might welcome some of those services, such as an annual head-to-toe checkup. We have no problem with that. But for the first time in American history, the federal government is forcing individuals and employers to pay for services, even when those services go against their faith. I think it speaks volumes to the priorities of this administration when under this mandate, you can't get an antibiotic without a copay, but a teenage girl can sterilize herself at somebody else's expense and without telling her parents. And the HHS mandate will affect the Catholic Church on a scale unseen in our history. Yes, there is a religious exemption, but it's so narrowly drawn that it doesn't protect organizations that carry out their work beyond the walls of a church, mosque, or synagogue. If fully implemented next August, hospitals, universities, charities, and businesses run by people of faith will either have to violate their conscience, pay bankrupting penalties, or stop offering health insurance to their employees. Our Catholic bishops know this looming threat is very real, and that is why this spring they unanimously, and it's not often our bishops speak with a singular voice, but they unanimously came out in opposition to this mandate, as did thousands of other religious and patriotic leaders. But this is not merely a Catholic issue. This is a First Amendment issue. That is why over 100 organizations have filed lawsuits against the administration. These groups include colleges like my alma mater, Notre Dame, businesses like Hobby Lobby and Hercules Industries, states, seven in fact, and numerous Catholic dioceses and charities. But these lawsuits, if successful, would only protect those plaintiffs. They do nothing to protect the hundreds of millions of the rest of us. This mandate puts at risk every person's religious freedom, regardless of his creed or background. And so today, together with tens of thousands of freedom-loving Americans all across the country, Republicans, Independents, and Democrats, we are standing up for religious freedom, and we petition our elected leaders to repeal this mandate now. Why should we have to spend millions of our dollars in legal fees and wait years for the Supreme Court to declare this mandate unconstitutional? We already know that it is, and our administration should know it too. The administration, if it desired, could order the repeal of this mandate on Monday morning. It could have done it last Monday morning. But even after months of pleas from all of our bishops and thousands of others across the country, it has refused to do so. So our message for the President and any politician who supports this mandate is this: we oppose it, and we will work day and night on every front until it is repealed. As for the Republican candidate Mitt Romney, he is pledged to repeal the mandate on day one of his administration. And if he's elected, we will hold him to that pledge with equal determination. The second front is an open assault on the fundamental unit of society, the family. Archbishop Lori states that secularism seeks to upend marriage as a God-given institution that is unique for a reason, namely, a relationship of love between one man and one woman, whereby children are welcomed into the world and nurtured. But secularists want to experiment with an age-old institution that is already proven to be the best environment to raise children in. They would deprive children of a natural father and mother. For their parts, Hollywood and pop culture try to normalize lifestyles once frowned upon by using comedy, portraying traditional values as bigoted, or hijacking the civil rights moniker and glorifying irresponsible behavior every chance that it gets. Secularism shows intolerance. When churches, homes, and businesses like Chick-fil-A are vandalized for promoting marriage. Intolerance is when pro-marriage billboards are defaced or refused posting by billboard companies. Intolerance is when employees and famous personalities are fired, demoted, and vilified for their comments in favor of marriage. No, my friends, real bigotry today does not come at the hands of religious folks. It comes in the form of intimidation, discrimination, and humiliation of decent men and women who simply want to practice what they believe at work, at home, and at school. But what I find most concerning is this administration's decision to abandon traditional marriage. Earlier this year, the administration became the first in American history to declare its support for same-sex marriages. And last spring, it instructed the Attorney General to stop defending in court the bipartisan Federal Defense of Marriage Act passed in 1996 under President Clinton, when it is still the current law of the land. In the next year or two, the issue of same-sex marriage will come before the Supreme Court in the form of legal challenges to that act, which I call DOMA. But in my judgment, I'm not confident the Supreme Court has the votes to uphold DOMA. A Supreme Court decision to strike down DOMA and therefore create a constitutional right for same-sex marriage would have consequences as significant to our nation as the Roe versus Wade decision. Activist state and federal appellate courts have routinely overturned the will of the people on this issue, as we saw in Vermont, California, and this week in the state of New York. And we don't want to see the Supreme Court do the same thing. But it would be foolish of us to believe it's not possible or likely to happen. Many of you grew up here in a time when school prayer was the norm and religious expression in public was common. If you don't notice this so much today, it is a direct result of one decision after the other of the Supreme Court banning those practices. I'm talking about school prayer, Ten Commandments, nativity displays, and more. Given the Supreme Court's record, I cannot emphasize enough the importance of who sits on the Supreme Court. And it's the president who decides who sits on that court. The next president will likely appoint one or more new justices to the Supreme Court. And just one new justice can be the crucial vote to protect the will of the people and marriage. These two new fronts that I've discussed today pose a significant threat to our way of life and our country's future. They're not going away anytime soon. But they do give us an opportunity to wake up and to stand up, to start renewing America, restoring its heritage, and celebrating, not apologizing for its values and traditions. So I have a message for the culture of secularism. We've had enough. We've had enough. We love our country, and we're ready to stand up for it. We will no longer back down from intimidation and discrimination. We will defend our faith courageously. We will re-evangelize our churches and communities. We will build up our own families, and we will show true tolerance. But most importantly, this election, we will vote for religious freedom. We will vote for life, liberty, and marriage. Can we win this fight against secularism? Can we heed the advice of Pope Benedict to counter relativism? I think we can. I think each one of you can make that difference in your family and in your community of friends. So if you've ever asked what the difference is that one person can make, look around you and doubt no more. Today's rally would not have been here if it weren't for the efforts of one woman who's never organized a rally in her life before, but who had decided that she'd had enough of watching from the sidelines, enough of seeing freedom of religion on assault, enough of watching the nation she loves change so dramatically and so quickly at time. So Melly Herford decided to stand up for her freedom and offer an opportunity for others like her to stand up, united, to say to Laredo and the community, to the nation, that there are still patriots in this land who love God, who love the Constitution, and who love liberty. So I want to thank you, Melly. God bless you and your committee for the example you've given each one of us here, and thank you to all the volunteers and media who are here helping to get our message out. I leave you with this. Remember to get out there and talk to your family and friends and coworkers. Let them know what you've learned today. Pray for our country and get involved with your community. But most importantly, when you cast your ballot this election, remember the consequences of your vote. One person can make an incredible difference, for the good or for the bad. It was one Jane Roe who brought abortion upon this country. And it will likely be just one justice of the Supreme Court who will determine the issue of marriage for the entire nation. So I can't overstate how important this election is this time around for our future. The religious freedom of every American and the future of marriage and the unborn is at stake. I ask you this year to put aside your political affiliations. We'll debate the other issues another time, but let's unite on this issue, on the issue of religious freedom, just like all the Catholic bishops have done. Catholic, Republican, Democrat, we got bishops of different kinds, but every single one has come out in opposition to this mandate, and they're asking for us to vote for freedom again. Vote your conscience. It matters this time more than any other. Thank you, and God bless you.